If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. And now, the Sunday address. Gee, you ever see one of those fights where there's just no good guys to root for? Well, here's another one for you. Shannon Sharpe's viral interview with Cat Williams caught fire, getting tens of millions of views in only a week or so. And there's been a lot of people out there trying to see if they can capture that same fire in a bottle. Predictably, one of these bottom feeders would be Stephen A. Smith, or Stephen Ain't Schmidt, as I like to call him. This last week, he decided to try to manufacture his own viral video by going in on, well, not the industry like Cat Williams did, because Stephen Smith's terrified of everybody in the white media, from the athletes to especially the white media executives who he answers to. So instead, he went the safe route. He went in on one person, a black person, of course, Jason Whitlock. Yawn. By the way, I have no sympathy for Whitlock. It's fine to go ahead and trash him, but just keep in mind, he's a safe target. Stephen Smith was acting like he had no choice but to make this video, when in reality he did this as shameless self-promotion. Now, before he spouted his expletives and invectives about Whitlock, he commented on the Pat McAfee controversy because, as he put it, he wasn't going to be immature enough to speak on family business.
The executives that we answer to at ESPN, they're my bosses. And I'm not going to be stupid enough, irresponsible enough, immature enough to think about that I can talk about family business. I don't do that. That's not going to happen. So don't expect me to speak on that ever, ever,
ever, ever. Did I say ever? Family business, he says. Family. Really? I mean, talk about going totally overboard to show the white executives at Disney that he considers them to be family. Or maybe he hopes they consider him to be family. You know, on the plantations, that was how the slave masters tried to present the black people they held captive and tortured and raped and worked to death. They presented it as some kind of putrid, sick, demented family. Sure, it was a family, all right, if you're talking about the Manson family. When Stephen Smith says family business, it's ridiculous because he's not some equal partner at the table. They're the adults. They give him his weekly allowance, and he does what they tell him to do. So after his little preamble, he finally got to the actual subject.
It's time for me to address this. I'm only going to do it once because this bastard is worth less than a damn cockroach. He wanted my attention. He's got it. Jason Whitlock. I said that name. It's not a name I've uttered. I normally don't do that, but it's necessary to do now. I've had enough of that fat bastard.
Stephen A. Smith versus Jason Whitlock. I mean, it's like a monster movie marathon, just villain after villain. Battle of the bootlicks. He wanted to go in on the fat man himself, who doesn't have anywhere near the audience that Stephen Smith does. A bloated, self-hating opportunist who has done nothing to warrant Smith's attention, much less a response. But hey, the Cat Williams video is hot right now. Shannon Sharpe is frequently on ESPN with Stephen Smith, so there's only about 1 degree of separation between them. Why not try to get some shine for yourself, am I right? But Stephen A. Smith is nothing if not a humble man, never one to brag on himself.
I'm the face of ESPN, and obviously there's a lot of things that went on this week in regards to Pat McAfee.
Of course, we don't concern ourselves with that at all. I could care less about the palace intrigue over at ESPN, though I did find it very interesting that he decided to say that he was the face of ESPN. Yeah, he wants to let them know, I'm a big man around here. I'm important around here. But he then went on to say this.
I did the same when I emailed the bosses at ESPN. This is my podcast. I own and operate this. I do what I want on this podcast. But it doesn't mean that I still don't harbor a responsibility to at least give my daytime employers a heads up as to what I'm about to do.
So, after prostrating himself to his owners at ESPN, employers, begging their forgiveness in advance for things he intended to say about a man who isn't an employee of ESPN and isn't associated with them in any way, comments Smith had already decided to make on his own personal podcast, but even so, because a slave doesn't so much as sneeze without first asking Massa if it's all right, he had to check in with his paymasters to get their permission, make sure it was okay with them. I'm going to speak my mind, if the bosses say that it's all right. I got a responsibility to check in with them. This is called trying to have it both ways. He's asking the white executives at ESPN if it's okay for him to speak his mind on his own podcast, but at the same time, he's his own man, right? Look, he just needs to be honest and say, okay, I work for them, and that being the case, if they say that I can't say it, I'm not going to. Why didn't he just be honest and say that? I want to speak my mind, but I had to ask their permission first. As long as he's honest about it, as long as he's honest about the fact that he's got to ask them whether or not it's okay for him to speak and what he's allowed to say, that's fine. But all of this trying to act like, oh, I'm just giving them advance warning of what I'm going to say regardless. No, that's not true at all. But after he checked in with Massa to get permission to speak his mind, he then said he contacted his sisters, nieces, nephews, and the boys in the industry.
My sisters, my nieces and nephews, my boys in the industry, everybody that I could reach out to in time has been warned.
Now, honestly, considering what a shameless self-promoting opportunist Stephen Smith is, do you really believe that he was warning his family, or was he asking them to help spread the word so he could get this to go viral? But nonetheless, I find it interesting that he's trying to act as if he's just giving people a heads up and being so considerate, because earlier on he said that he was only going to do this one time. Now, if you honestly believe that this is the last time he's going to mention Jason Whitlock, I got a bridge to sell you. As he said at the beginning, he almost never says Jason Whitlock's name. Almost means that he said it in the past, and he will do so in the future. This kind of blatant open tongue lashing, it guarantees that everyone's going to be asking him about this for a long while, which was the entire point of doing it. The video was clickbait, and it worked. It's gotten over 1 million views already. Typically, Steven's YouTube channel numbers fluctuate wildly. A hell of a lot of his videos usually get about 5,000 to 7,000 views, though a number of them, depending on the subject matter, could get as high as 100,000 views. That seems to be kind of rare for him. But most of his views are, on the average, between 40 and 50,000 views a video, on the average. Now, this is the guy who claims he's the face of ESPN.
I'm the face of ESPN.
And yet the face of ESPN goes and does this. Now, what does that tell you about the white executives at ESPN and its parent company, Disney? He emails or calls them up first to tell them in advance that he's going to go on a profanity-filled rant on his little podcast, and they don't bat an eyelash. They don't seem to have a problem with it at all. Now, I won't play all of Smith's comments, obviously. He just went on and on and on, and he was cursing like there was no tomorrow. And after all, this is Stephen Smith we're talking about here. I don't want to subject anyone to his avalanche of BS if I can avoid it. But he went over the top pretending like he had been trying just so hard to avoid this. He was trying to restrain himself. He made oaths to people. He made promises. He promised his mother, his pastor, his owners, employers at ESPN. He promised the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. And he's got to do all that. He's got to give all these warnings in advance. After all, he's the face of ESPN.
I'm the face of ESPN.
So he did everything he could to avoid talking about Jason Whitlock, and he did his best, everything he could to hold his peace. But he simply couldn't, especially not after the success of Shannon Sharpe's viral video of Cat Williams. After that, Jason Whitlock's scurrilous attacks simply became unavoidable to respond to. Now, why would Stephen Smith be telling his family and friends that he was going to do this in advance? Stephen Smith made his reputation, such as it is, by being a shameless suck-up opportunist, a professional screaming, loud, obnoxious BS artist. He's not some saint. He's not some mild-mannered, gentle person. Nobody who knows him would ever think that about him. His diatribe about Whitlock is actually par for the course with the exception of the profanity. It's exactly what he does every day on his little TV show. This was not out of character for him at all. Why was he acting like it was? Why would he act like his family and friends wouldn't recognize him from this? He screams and yells 5 days a week about complete strangers in the sports world. He throws insults day and night about total strangers. He condescends to and tears people down all the time. The real surprise would have been if Stephen Smith had said, I'm going to have a civilized conversation with Jason Whitlock in the studio, and we're going to try to hash this out like men. Now, if he had done that, that would have been out of character for him. And to the slow coast in the room, no, I'm not saying that he should have had a conversation with Jason Whitlock at all, or even been talking about him. Neither one of them's worth a rip. Never mind that even Shannon Sharpe criticized Stephen Smith for doing this. Sharpe said that he had told Smith, don't lend your audience's attention to people like Jason Whitlock. Don't loan your audience out to people like that. Don't give them any attention. Don't give them any shine. Don't give them any air. Jason Whitlock's been pathetically trying to start some online beefing with someone, anyone, trying to beef his way to greatness, and it's not working because he has no charisma, no talent, and he doesn't even deliver his crappy little statements well. There's nothing compelling about that clown, which makes him an easy target for an overhyped blowhard like Stephen Smith, who, were it not for ESPN giving him their best time slot, nobody would know or care about him either. But that's Stephen Smith, the pathological bootlick, sucking up to his owners, employers, and letting them know that he considers ESPN to be his family. Except Stephen Smith is not the father of the family. He's not the wife. Hell, he's not even one of the children. He's the dog, the family pet. See, the family dog is part of the family too, you know. Stephen Smith attacks Jason Whitlock for the same kind of things that he himself has done. Smith's problem is that he has personality conflicts with Whitlock. Who doesn't? But even when Stephen Smith decides that he's going to call Whitlock out for his shameless bootlicking, it seems to draw a similarity between himself and Whitlock. Consider this bit of dirt that Stephen dished about how Jason Whitlock was sucking up to white executives by dumping on black people.
Let me give you a quote that this guy, Greg Howard, has a recording of Jason Whitlock saying to his staff at that time. If you're more comfortable working for white people rather than working for me, and that sounds humorous, but it's the truth, fine. This is according to audio obtained by Deadspin back in 2015. Some black people are far more comfortable answering to a white person than a black person, no matter how black they like to pass themselves off to be. Far more comfortable because they know a white person is going to overlook their shortcomings. It's good for a Negro. I'm not about that. But if you're more comfortable working for a white person, I will find a white person for you to work for. We have a higher standard here. Everybody has to get on board with that, or I'm going to find a way to move them someplace else. That was Jason Whitlock. And then he went out and hired a senior writer and editor, Mike Wise, who's white.
Now, for some reason, that little story that he told reminds me of how Stephen Smith was saying that he gets up every morning with only two thoughts in his head: making his bosses, who are white by the way, more money, and trying to figure out how he can finesse himself some of it. You see, the difference happens to be that Jason Whitlock was playing the game of, I'm going to ingratiate myself with these racist white media executives by saying everything that I know that they say about black people. Black people, they just want someone to hand them something, and they know white folks are going to be scared. White guilt of it. That's the stuff that he's playing to, and it's obvious that Whitlock's doing that. Now, this alleged recording, assuming that it does indeed exist, it doesn't tell us anything about Jason Whitlock that we didn't know. This man spends a lot of time shamelessly sucking up to white employers by dumping on black people. That's his ticket to ride. That's how he shows them, see, I care about your interests more than you do. Look at what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to get out here and make myself a pariah just if you'll give me a paycheck, please. The same thing Stephen Smith does, only he doesn't dump on the black community, at least not directly. But when he's sitting here saying, I only have two things in mind when I get up: how to make my bosses more money and how I can get some of it. These are flip sides of the same coin. Both of them are saying the same thing. Massa, what do I have to say to you to let you know I'm putting your interest first? I'm putting your interest above everything, Massa. Only you matter to me, Massa. Only you. Both of them are giving love letters to their employers. Both of them are trying to shamelessly ingratiate themselves to the white media paymasters that they want to get some money from. Stephen Smith, though, while he points the dirty end of the stick at Jason Whitlock, needs to take a look at himself. There's a reason why Stephen Smith has the infamous reputation that he does in the black community, because he himself has said a number of disparaging things about the black community, which he conveniently forgot about during this diatribe. Jason Whitlock's problem is that he doesn't have the talent, charisma, or knowledge to be a significant on-air personality. Hell, he's been trying to figure out some way to get himself an AM talk radio show, a real one, I mean. He thinks that if he just dumps on black people long enough, hard enough, then surely there's going to be all of these white sponsors and white radio stations, and they're going to make him the next Rush Limbaugh. I mean in terms of salary, not in terms of popularity. Nobody can pull off that miracle. He's been trying to pivot to being a right-wing mouthpiece for several years now. But nobody on that side of the political media line has been trying to give him anything, so he becomes more extreme with the rhetoric. He is clearly auditioning for a job with Fox News or Newsmax, maybe Sinclair Radio. Just give him some sort of nationwide syndicated show, something, anything. He'll take whatever he can get. But then again, Stephen Smith said he's all chummy with Mark Levin, Sean Hannity, Blaze TV, and a number of the most infamous racists on the white right.
I bring up Blaze TV, which is where Whitlock works, because I want Blaze TV to understand I'm not talking about you. I know you're a conservative, arm, you can serve, I get all of that. I'm not judging accordingly. I know Mark Levin well. We have one another on speed dial. We talk all the time. The same applies to Sean Hannity, the Andrew Wilkows of the world. Okay? I talk to these folks. I'm not one of those people that's married to one side or the other. And decent people are everywhere.
You, get that? He calls trash like Mark Levin, Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck, and the rest of those racist reprobates decent people. Kind of reminds you of Donald Trump calling neo-Nazis very fine people, don't it? So Stephen Smith is friends with and has great respect for a bunch of the most notorious card-carrying, mouth-frothing, knuckle-dragging, drool-on-their-shoes white supremacists. And Stephen Smith has them on speed dial and brags about it. He considers them decent people. Now tell me, how is this any better or any different than what he accused Whitlock of? He's got problems with a black person talking trash about black people, but he doesn't have a problem with the white ones who do the same kind of things. These two guys are flip sides of the same dirty coin. Black people have known since the first white supremacists set foot in Africa that the fastest way to ingratiate yourself with white power is to attack other black people. Also, I need to reiterate here, even though I haven't played any of those clips, trust me, Stephen Smith was trying to curse up a storm. He was doing that to try to get some attention. That was basically what this diatribe was full of, all these little four-letter words, and he's acting like a kid who just discovered a new word and going overboard with it. But then again, that's what bootlicks always do, just like Roly-Poly and Eli Mistal. Oh, these guys are so reserved and so poised, and they don't use salty language whenever they're in front of white company. They only get profane when they're talking about black people. When it comes time to talk about black people, oh, they just make sure that all the four-letter words are flying. They just can't contain themselves. When Stephen Smith said that he told his white paymasters, employers at ESPN, that he was going to pull this stunt, of course he knew they would approve, because he was going to go in on another black person. See, they don't have a problem with that. They never do. If Stephen Smith really wanted to show some nerve, he would have gone in on, say, Mark Levin or some other white media personality, but his white paymasters at ESPN wouldn't have approved of that, no matter who he went in on. Anytime some black person in the white media calls themselves talking recklessly about a white person, be it Don Lemon or Tiffany Cross, they get the boot. But if you curse and attack black people, well, there's nothing to see here. Now again, for the folks who don't pay attention, there's nobody to root for here. I don't like either one of these fools, but it says a lot that both of them make it a point to go in on black people like crazy, but they watch their tongues if they're talking about white people. They know the rules of working for the white media. This is how these bootlicks always wind up, at one another's throats. Bootlicking doesn't come with a retirement plan, but if you work it the right way, you can get the occasional monthly bonus. If your masters let you keep it, that is. These two can claim to hate each other all they want, but the reality is the similarities between them far outweigh the differences. About the only difference between the two of them is 100 pounds and half a head of hair. And that's the real reason they don't like each other, because they're both so similar. Both of them don't respect anything or anyone except for their white paymasters. Both of them have nothing but contempt for the black community. Both of them have stepped on plenty of people's heads to get to where they are, although Stephen Smith got a lot farther than Whitlock. For his part, Whitlock has tried to capitalize on this would-be beef with Stephen Smith, but as with everything else he's ever done, he's been a disappointment on that one too. So this fight will be largely one-sided, but that doesn't mean that it won't be gratifying to watch these two bootlicks trading insults. Stephen Smith got over 1 million views out of this one, so to build his YouTube channel, you can bet he'll be coming back to this one, and Whitlock will give his own anemic responses. And what do I think about all this? Well, to borrow a phrase from Star Wars, begun the Coon Wars have. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Cyberdyne100, Chevalier Foster, Mike Hughes, Alexandria Victor, and Sean. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.